I think, unfortunately, some of them were useful idiots in this crusade on Matt Gaetz's part. It was petty, it was personal, and it really, again, undermined the conference and the institution. Unfortunately, these 8 individuals torpedoed the conference, took out our best player on the field, if you will, and created a constitutional crisis.
That is Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York criticizing the members of his party who voted to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Garrett Graves of Louisiana, who also was a little unhappy at that handful of Republicans for that vote. Here he is.
Oh, look at that. Oh, look, give me money. I filed the motion to vacate. Using official actions to raise money. It's disgusting.
Congressman, good morning. Great to have you on the show. So obviously, we know how you feel about it there, that it was a fundraising, brand building, attention grabbing move by these 8 Republicans. How do you explain how we got to this place? Does it just go back to that 15th vote back in January where Speaker McCarthy had to agree to the one member that could raise the motion to vacate the chair?
Well, look, something I think that's important to keep in mind is that had been the rule in the House for over 100 years. It was Nancy Pelosi who changed it. I think what's happened in more recent history is that members have become more bombastic, more provocative, and I think egged on as a result of some of the distorted incentives through social media and, as I noted on the House floor, through fundraising objectives.
So, Congressman, you talked about a couple of days ago this caucus meeting, and you said if we'd stayed in there a couple minutes longer, there may have been a fist fight in there. I don't think you were kidding about that. Can you share what it was like in these final moments as you tried to save Speaker McCarthy's job?
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of frustration. Look, let me put this in a perspective that maybe is a little more digestible for some folks that are watching right now. This would be like Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump getting together with AOC Tlaib and whoever else is on the squad, and them coming up with a plan to impeach Joe Biden, and then of course the squad and all the Republicans voting to impeach. I mean, that's effectively what just happened. That was sort of a compliment to Matt Gaetz, but in any case, that's sort of what just happened. So then you're left with Vice President Harris as the president of the United States. And of course, all the Democrats want to strangle, figuratively, AOC and the squad. And so that's kind of just what happened. But the tension was so strong. You got to keep in mind that what happened a couple of days ago is that Matt Gaetz and just 7 so-called Republicans got together with 208 Democrats and threw the leader of the Republican Party out, someone that we viewed as being one of the most successful leaders that we've had in recent history.
So, Congressman, good morning. There's been a lot of uproar from Democrats that former Speaker Pelosi, Representative Steny Hoyer were both booted out of their longtime Capitol hideaway offices. It's been tradition for them to have those. What was the reasoning behind this decision? Why did Republicans do that?
Well, look, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding in that there is an office for the preceding speaker. But as a result of folks like Nancy Pelosi supporting the ouster of McCarthy, they have created a new preceding speaker. So effectively, she's the one who evicted herself.
Joe Scarborough here. So tell me, you had suggested that the squad was about the same as the 5 or 6 people that ousted McCarthy. Nancy Pelosi had about a 5-vote majority, still got things done. Why do you think it is that Democrats and Nancy Pelosi were able to keep the House in order and Republicans weren't?
You know, Joe, it is a fantastic question, and you obviously understand this intimately from your service in the Congress. The Democrats, and it's a characteristic of the ideology where they bond together much more. I think they're used to having a little bit more centralized leadership, representing urban areas, more dependence upon government. And you are intimately aware of the Lone Ranger status, the independence, the give me liberty or give me death perspective of many conservatives, of many Republicans. And I think that that's where you just really have that tension, and that Republicans don't want to be told what to do, don't want to be centralized. And I think it really is sort of a characteristic or a tendency of many Republicans or of conservatives that really is at odds with this whole concept of a central leader. Last thing is, something Kevin McCarthy said a lot that I think it's really poignant in this case. He didn't hire and he can't fire any of the members that he's supposed to be leading. It really creates a challenging management structure. But once again, I think it's more characteristic of Republican ideology to be more independent.
But is Kevin McCarthy an effective leader? I mean, is Kevin's biggest problem is that the guy just couldn't be trusted by members, whether it was Democrats or Republicans?
I think that the biggest problem, and probably to do a better job answering Willie's question earlier, is that Matt Gaetz, and look, I think the same district as you represented, he hated McCarthy from the beginning. Keep in mind, he never voted for McCarthy. Even at the end, he didn't vote for him. In fact, the majority of people that voted, Republicans that voted to oust him, never voted for him for Speaker. Matt Gaetz was so mad that he lost that battle back in January. He was telling everyone that McCarthy was never going to be Speaker, and Matt Gaetz lost, and he never got over it. So he continued trying over and over again to try and oust McCarthy. Now, look, the other part you asked, was he an effective leader? I think he was an incredible leader. Look at what happened in debt ceiling negotiations, the largest savings in American history negotiated, and President Biden was really forced to sign it. I remember at one point in negotiations, senior White House officials looking across the table and saying, quote, "There's not a damn thing in here for Democrats." And like, nope, there's not. But and so I think that's indicative of McCarthy's leadership, and also the DC crime bill, ending COVID emergency, and other things. He did that under a very tight majority, only having one half of one branch of the three branches of government. And I think he did an extraordinary job.
Congressman, I quoted the father of conservatism, Edmund Burke, in the last segment. And Burke wrote, and obviously he was reflecting on the revolution in France and the chaos that radicalism brought. But he said that we all need to be very careful about tearing down institutions, because we can tear down an institution in a day that took a century to build up. I want to ask you, how conservative is it to tear down an institution in a day? And while you're tearing down that institution, sending out fundraising letters, telling people, hey, look at me, I'm tearing down the People's House. I'm tearing down an institution that is at the epicenter of freedom across the globe. I'm tearing down a place that has had a big role in feeding and freeing more people than any other governing body in the history of humankind. But I'm sending out a fundraising letter now to brag about the fact that I'm leaving this House of Representatives, the People's House, without a speaker for the first time in its history. How does that make you feel? And how does that make your fellow Republicans feel in the House caucus?
Look, I think it's absolutely disgusting. I think people should be imprisoned for actions like that. And Joe, it hasn't stopped. Matt Gaetz has continued to send out fundraising pleas, claiming that he's under attack. I mean, look, these are self-inflicted wounds that he caused himself. I think it's absolutely disgusting. And whether you quote Edmund Burke, you look at George Washington's farewell address, you look at Abraham Lincoln's House Divided. This is not the United States. Look, we all know it's more expensive to do business here from a tax, a labor, and environmental compliance perspective. But one of the reasons people continue investing in the United States is because we have a stable regulatory, a stable legal climate. What Matt Gaetz just did is he blew that up. He created instability in an already challenging economy, in an already challenging and divisive country. This was the wrong move. It was incredibly selfish, as you've noted. The guy needs money like he needs a hole in his head. And this was all done. This is as swampy as it gets. It was all done for ego, for selfish reasons. And yes, you're exactly right. This divides our House. This destroys democracy and stability. And it was obviously for the wrong intentions or motives.
Yeah, Congressman, I can tell you this isn't playing very well in the cheap seats around the world as they watch what's happening here in Washington and try to look at America as an inspiration for stable government and solid democracy. But isn't it a bit easy to say that this is just the personalities of Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy? Isn't this a situation that you've got on the right of the Republican Party at the moment where the whole purpose of that group is to disrupt? I mean, we heard Donald Trump say it, that he wanted the dismantlement of the administrative state. I mean, replace Matt Gaetz with somebody else, replace Kevin McCarthy with somebody else, and you could still have this situation again.
I think you raise a great point, which is why I said I think it would be a fundamental mistake for Republicans to come in and simply have each member of the leadership take one step up the ladder. I think that we really need to take a step back. Keep in mind, we effectively have evicted the last three leaders of the Republican Party. You could probably go back and justify a statement beyond there. I think that before we even think about electing the next speaker, we need to think more carefully about the structure, about the rules related to being Speaker of the House, being in leadership, and trying to create more stability to not allow for these folks like Matt Gaetz to go out there and carry out actions that are so chaotic and disruptive for very selfish reasons. So I think we really need to be more thoughtful about stability and ensuring that the rules allow or provide for that.
All right, Republican Congressman Garrett Graves of Louisiana, we thank you so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a good day.